All right, so we're going to talk about hydraulic and pneumatic systems in this topic. So we did talk about this in our very first unit, the difference between hydraulic and pneumatic systems. So hydraulic systems, they use the force of a liquid in a confined space, so usually an oil, such as an oil pipeline. So hydraulic systems, they apply two essential characteristics of fluids, that they are incompressible and that they are able to transmit pressure. Pneumatic systems use a gas, but they do not seal the gas. So the gas is usually just air, but it is not sealed the way it is in a hydraulic system. So, not sealed, and it's a gas instead of a liquid. So usually the air will pass through the pneumatic device under a high pressure, and then it will escape outside of the device. The high pressure air, it usually comes from a machine that will draw in outside air and then compress it. Hoses will then carry that high pressure air to the pneumatic device. So here is pneumatics at work. An example is a jackhammer. It's used to break up concrete, usually when a sidewalk or a road is being repaired. It's also used in the mining of coal, nickel, and gold. So there's bursts of air under very high pressure. They'll drive a part called a chuck, shown right here, in and out of the jackhammer at very high speeds. It resembles a very large screwdriver. The chuck will then pound the rock or concrete into fragments. All right, so that is using compressed air. Staple guns, pneumatic nailers, they also use pulses of air pressure to drive staples or nails into solid objects. All right, so seen here, that's a staple gun at work. Staple guns are used in making furniture, woodworking, upholstering, many other applications. Pneumatic nailers can even nail wood into concrete. Sandblasters is another example. Here's an example of a building before sandblasting, and here's what it looks like after sandblasting. So sandblasters, they use high pressure air blasts. High pressure air blasts tiny sand particles out of a nozzle, and it removes dirt and paint from stone or brick. So they can look way, way newer. It can also be used on slippery granite or marble to make it safer. So you can sandblast slippery granite or marble so that when you're stepping on it, it roughens the edges of the stairs so that you're not slipping. Here's another example, a cast here filled with pressurized air. So you have a solid frame with a balloon-like lining. It's fitted to the injured leg. High pressure air is pumped into the lining through a hose, and you can control that air pressure, and you can make this cast fit nice and snug and securely. All right, so if you've ever sprained or fractured, maybe you've worn one of these before. Here's a hovercraft, also using pneumatics. So used primarily for rescue operations. Hovercraft can transport people and cars and equipment long distances over land or water. So we have powerful pumps that will draw outside air. They'll pump it through holes in the bottom of the hovercraft. And there's a skirt at the bottom right here. It'll hold in enough air to support the weight of the craft above water or land. So you can, given enough air pressure, these hovercrafts can support really heavy loads. And then they have propellers as well that'll drive the hovercraft forward. There are rudders that will steer it. All right, here are some examples of hydraulics. Bulldozers, backhoes, cherry pickers, tractors. They contain tanks that are filled with hydraulic fluid and pumps that will generate pressure. Most hydraulic equipment, the energy for pumping is usually supplied by a gasoline engine or by an electric motor. Then there are valves that will direct the high pressure fluid through steel pipes to the parts of the machine where the pressure of the fluid is needed to generate large forces to lift or dig. And keep in mind, hydraulics, it is an enclosed system. And then often the steering and braking systems in these large machines will also be powered by the high pressure hydraulic fluid. Okay, so here's a backhoe, a tractor. This is some sort of heavy equipment. Here, hydraulics in flight. Airplanes, when an airplane taxis along a runway, the pilot steers the plane using the nose wheel, and then during takeoff, the pilot may lower the flaps, shown here. And to make a turn while airborne, the pilot moves the ailerons up or down and adjusts the rudder. To keep the plane level, the pilot has to adjust the elevators. Even when they're landing a plane, it's a multi-step process. They have to use hydraulics to lower the flaps and slats to slow the aircraft during the approach before landing. The pilot also uses hydraulics to raise the spoilers, shown here. When the aircraft touches down, the spoilers prevent the wing from lifting the aircraft up again. All right, so lots of separate hydraulic systems in airplanes. Hydraulics and pneumatics are also present in our bodies. Our respiratory system in the body, that's a pneumatic system. It's made up of lungs and tubes that allow the air to enter and leave the lungs. There's also muscles that cause our lungs to expand and contract. So when we breathe, it depends on changes in air pressure. Our muscles make our lungs expand. We can draw in about 500 milliliters of air, and then relaxing will push that air out. Our circulatory system would be a hydraulic system. It's enclosed. So our blood is kept under pressure so that it can be pumped to all parts of the body. Our heart is the pump that moves the blood through the blood vessels with pressure that will rise and fall. So each time the heart beats, it exerts a force on the blood, pushes it along. And the blood pressure is also exerted by blood against the inner walls of our arteries. So when blood leaves the left ventricle of our heart, it travels through the arteries, then the capillaries, and then the veins, and then it will return back to our heart. So this is just showing, for example, the aorta, which is a large artery. It'll branch into smaller arteries, and then we have the capillaries, and then capillaries to veins, and then back to the heart. Valves and pumps. So pressure is transmitted equally throughout a fluid, but what will happen if the pressure gets reduced in one area? So think about like if you're holding an inflated balloon closed, the pressure inside is equal throughout the balloon. But when you release your fingers, the pressure in the neck of the balloon gets reduced and the air will come rushing out. Another example is when you turn on the tap, the pressure on one side of the tap is greater than the pressure on the other side. So that water will then move from high pressure to low pressure. Okay, and in both of those situations, there is a valve that is being used to control the fluid. Remember, a fluid can be a gas or liquid. Here in the body, we have a valve. It's a movable part that controls the flow of a fluid by opening or closing. So here in our veins, we have valves. You may remember when we did our unit on cells and systems. All right, so when blood will pass through, the valve will close. It'll prevent the blood from flowing backwards. So that's in our veins. And skeletal muscles are very important there as well because they squeeze the veins and they ensure that the blood is forced upwards back towards the heart. The other example of the valve was the balloon example. So when your fingers were holding the balloon closed, your fingers were acting as the valve. The cap would be the valve in the water pipe. Those would be both manually operated valves. Here in the heart, the human heart, it's two pumps which circulate blood throughout the arteries and capillaries in the body. There are 4 automatic valves in the heart to circulate the blood. So blood pressure increases and decreases between heartbeats. Immediately after the heart contracts, there's a surge of blood that causes high pressure in the arteries. Then before the next heartbeat, the pressure will fall and then increase again at the next contraction. So here are the valves. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 valves in the heart. Okay, so I'll pause here